Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We will just give this a couple more minutes to let everyone come in, and then we will get started. All right. I think we have a good group of ladies here. So we're just going to jump right into it. Thank you for making the time to come listen to this presentation. Breaking into tech is something that I am super passionate about. I love to talk about it because this is very much my story. And any which way that I can help people to find their footing, any which way I can help people to get that dream job that they've always wanted, always makes me happy and excited. So I'm very happy to be here. Now, I know that as we go through the presentation, you'll probably have questions. Just put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I have some time at the end of this presentation where I will go into Q&A. So if we're all good, I can't see you, but I'm assuming we're all thumbsing up. We will get started. So I'll just introduce myself first of all, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide because I want to share my story with you all, and I hope that my story will resonate with you, and you will be inspired, and you would feel like you can take on the world. I truly believe that if I could accomplish the things that I have been blessed to accomplish, anyone in this world can do the same. So I'm going to take you all the way back to the early 80s. Don't worry, we're only spending about 10 minutes on this. So I was born in the mid 80s, actually, in Nigeria. And we had a fairly good life. My parents were middle class, we're a middle class family. But as we were growing up, unfortunately, our where we're growing up became a hub for religious violence. So there was a lot of unrest in the communities. You don't go out on Fridays, and even when you go out, you have to be very watchful because you never know when a riot would just erupt and you'd be running for your life. I remember very clearly when I was on my college campus with my mom, and we were just walking, taking a stroll, and from nowhere we just saw this mob of like at least 1,000 people just coming at us, chanting and just out for blood. And I remember being so scared that I was frozen. You know how you see it in the movies where people are so scared and they can't move, and you're shouting on the other side of the screen, you're like, move, move. It is such a real thing to be disabled by fear. And I just stood there, just watching this mob come closer and closer. And up till today, I don't know who it was, but somebody just yelled, run. And that kind of broke me out of that mode. And we took off and we fled and we found a place to hide and we weren't harmed. But after that experience, seeing my uncle unfortunately get burned alive, I had a cousin who was maimed. I decided that I wanted to change my life. Like I was going to um, switch things up. I was no longer going to allow my environment to define me. This was not life, running back and forth and, being scared to just live. That's not life. And so I decided that I wanted to change my life. And I knew that in order for me to change my life, again, being Nigerian, we believe very much in education. I knew that I wanted to get a master's in something, whether it was electrical engineering or whatever it was. I needed to get a master's. I needed to leave the country. So I looked around. I felt like the degree that I had was not strong enough to help me get a scholarship. I also knew that because my parents were middle class families, I would not be able to pay the tuition. And so I knew I needed to get a scholarship. And that was when I decided that I was going to teach myself how to code. So my original degree is in electrical engineering. And the way, things worked back then, electrical engineers you don't get to learn to code. And even if you were learning to code, we were learning to code on paper. So we're writing code on paper. And I don't know how the professor was grading it, but he really wasn't learning to code. So I really wanted to teach myself how to code. And again, this was way back then. There was hardly any internet. So I would go to the internet cafe, try to download as much stuff as I could, and try to just teach myself because I really, really wanted to change my situation. And so I started to teach myself how to code. As luck would have it, my mom got a laptop through like a government program. So I took that laptop from her and I started to use it. And as I was building out my project in ASP.NET, again, I was teaching myself from scratch. Like I did not know anything about coding. And I had decided to build this massive project. So as I was trying, I was piecing things together, I was Googling things and learning, I got stuck. Now, if there's anybody on this call, which I'm sure there are a bunch of us because this is a Women in Tech call, if you've ever tried to code, you know that you can very quickly run into errors. And I think the debuggers are better these days, but back then, if you're missing the semicolon, the error log could be like 100 lines long. And you have to figure out what exactly is causing that error because the error log is not necessarily informative. And so as I was working through my project, I hit one of those errors and I could just not figure it out. But again, there was just the determination to make a difference in my life, to change my life, to change my environment. And I really, truly believed in myself. I believed that in the right space, I could thrive. And so I Googled the problem that I was having, and there was a guy who had written a blog post about a similar problem, but not exactly the same problem. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, would you help me? This is what I'm trying to do. This is how I'm trying to change my life. This is how I am trying to break into tech. And surprisingly, the gentleman was in India and I was in Nigeria. Surprisingly, he responded and said, yes, I will help you. And so he became a mentor for me. And I would write my code, I would zip it up. I didn't know how to use GitHub then. So I would write my code, zip it into a file, email it to him. He would download it on his end, look through it, give me feedback, teach me what I was doing wrong. And we did that back and forth for about 6 months. And because of that mentorship, because he was able to help me with my project, I was able to finish it. And that was what helped me get a scholarship here in the US. So I came to the US in 2010 and I got my master's in computer science. That's a whole different story as to how I got through those 2 years, because coming from an electrical engineering background, we've never learned how to code, coming from a third world country, whose educational systems were a bit behind the ones in the US, it was pretty challenging. But again, I always go back to I believed in myself and I believed that I could do it. So, with blood, sweat, and tears, I made it through the master's program. But then very quickly, trying to get into the workforce, reality hit in the face that having a master's program was not enough. When I was in school, again, being an immigrant, I was more focused on survival. Like, how am I going to survive these classes? How am I going to make money during the summer so that my parents didn't have to send money or worry about me because there are lots of bills to pay. And so while my mates were going off doing internships, I was busy working because I felt like I had to make ends meet. And so after I graduated, I applied everywhere. Now, the school I went to was Tufts University, and it's a pretty highly ranked school. And so all the places that people were applying to were Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, all the big name companies. And so I tried as well, but nobody would ever call me back, and I was like, is it my name? Is it because my last name sounds Nigerian? and they don't want to give me a shot? Is it because, I'm an immigrant? All those kind of things that we tell ourselves sometimes. But in reality, I was able to get a recruiter who gave me feedback. And she said the problem was that I had no internships on my resume. I only had coursework. I had the project that I did back in Nigeria, and then I had coursework from my master's program. And that was not enough for people to invite me to an interview. And so that was something that I learned the hard way. And, being an immigrant, there's visa issues. So I just took the first job that I got, which was a manual tester. So I was doing some manual testing for some in a company called Cablevision. Ladies, when I tell you that was the hardest job I ever did, I am not exaggerating. That was hard. And it was very hard because it didn't align with my personality. And I'm going to talk through, after I share my story, I'm going to, highlight some of the things that I'm saying here. But it is so important that as you're trying to break into tech, that you find something that really aligns with your interests, aligns with your personality. If you are a manual tester, you have to have a fair amount of skepticism. You never want to put an optimist to be a manual tester, which is what I am. I'm an optimist. And so I have this device that I'm testing, and I'm like, oh, this looks good. Design. When a tester should be actively trying to break it, right? So I was not the right person for that role, but it was a job, right? And it was a foot in the door. And so when I realized, okay, this didn't align with my personality, it didn't align with my interests, I started to look for opportunities within that organization to be a developer. So I would talk to the development teams. Hey, do you have any projects that you don't have time to work on that I can work on? And they started to give me, a few things here and there that nobody really wanted to do. But that was how I started to prove myself that, oh yeah, I am good at this. I can do this, and I can learn, and I can provide value to an organization. And so after about 6 months of, doing projects here and there, I was moved to a full developer role. So getting the foot in the door sometimes can be more important than exactly what you're doing. And once you get your foot in the door, then you can grow into bigger and better roles. But it is important to know exactly where you're trying to get to. So after I worked in that organization for about a year, I had set my sights on being an engineer for Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, one of the big four. And so I started applying again. I was like, okay, I've worked for about a year, so maybe now people would, take me more seriously. I have work experience on my resume, but I still wasn't getting a lot of feedback. And so what I decided to do was I decided that I was going to upskill myself, right? It's not enough to just show what you're doing, what you're being paid to do, but how can I show these people that I am somebody who's growth minded, I am somebody who's willing to learn, and I am somebody who takes initiative. So I decided to I don't know if this book is still popular, but this was the book that I used. It's like at least 300 pages. I studied this book from cover to cover, practiced all the interviews so that when I did get a chance to interview, I was ready to interview. And then I started to work on side projects. So I was working full time. And then in the evenings, I would work on side projects with the latest and greatest technologies at the time. So then it was Django and, oh man, I forget the other one. But Django is the one that I remember. And so I would go online, start to learn about Django. And then I started to build projects, things that I was passionate about, things that I cared about. At some point, I was trying to build a daycare app because I have kiddos. But it really helped me to upskill, and very importantly, to be able to show on my resume to recruiters that I am somebody who can learn new things. I was somebody that they could take a chance on. And I was somebody who was willing to go the extra mile, if you will. So once I started working on those side projects, I started to get interviews. started getting interviews with Amazon, Microsoft, all the places that I really had set my sights on. And it didn't always go well. There were some interviews that I was so nervous, I completely bombed the interview. There were some that 30 minutes into the interview, I knew I was not getting the job because of the way the interviewer was acting. But I still had to endure 6 more hours of interviews. But you just can never be the person that gives up when things get hard, right? You have to keep trying. You have to keep trying over and over, because all you need is one person to say yes to you, right? You may get 10 no's, but you just need the one yes. And for me, that one yes came from Microsoft. So I was 37 weeks pregnant at the time when I got the when I got the opportunity to interview for Microsoft. Like, who in their right mind goes to interview 37 weeks pregnant? But I was like, this is my opportunity. I gotta take it. If I try to push it a few more weeks, only God knows how the birth would go. And that would probably be about 12 weeks out. I just got to show up with my big belly and just make this work. So I went there, me and my baby. Man, it was hot. It was hard. It was like 7 hours of standing. Because when you're doing the coding interviews, you're writing on the whiteboard. It was 7 hours of standing. And the interviewers probably didn't even know what to do with me because they weren't expecting a heavily pregnant woman. But I showed up and I showed them that I was ready to work and I was ready to work hard and I was willing to learn and do whatever was the organization needed. And so I got that job. So I got the job in Microsoft. That was my one yes. Now, it wasn't exactly the job that I wanted. It was a step above manual testing. But the way that I saw it was, all right, I had taken my manual testing experience, I had taken my development experience from the previous job, I had taken the side project that I had done, and I had leveled up. So now I was not a manual tester, I was an automated tester. So I was writing some code to do automated tests. But my goal was always to be a developer. And so after I did stayed in the role for testing for about a year, I did exactly the same thing I did in other organizations. I started to talk to development teams. Hey, are there any projects that you have that you don't have time that I can help with? And that was how I worked my way into a development role at Microsoft. And then for me, life is always evolving, right? And I'm sure you all have seen this in your lives. What worked before is not what works for you now. And so after being in that role for about 2 years, I wanted to do something different. I really wanted to give back. I really wanted to work on something that was impactful to the community. And so that's when I decided to leave Microsoft and I started my own company where I teach kids how to code. So that's what I do right now. So we teach kids how to code, and all of the experiences that I went through, from coming from Nigeria, teaching myself how to code, going through a master's program, having to work my way up the tech ladder, really prepared me for this leadership role. And now we have 40 locations across the US where we're inspiring kids to break into tech, if you will. And it's really like a full circle moment. So all of the mentorship that I received from that guy in India, I get to pass that on to kids. And now I'm starting a new venture where I'm helping tech companies retain their women in tech. So it's all connected. Every experience that I have had is all connected. And when you're thinking about breaking into tech, it's always about how can I take what I have, add some stuff on top of it to get to where I want to get to. So that's my story. And I'm just going to talk really quickly about some of the common myths that I have heard about tech careers as people are trying to break into this field. The first myth is that you need a computer science degree. And that's just not true. I initially did not have a computer science degree. I got a computer science degree eventually, but that was really just a vehicle for me to come to the US and escape the situation that I was in. Even with my electrical engineering degree, I still could have broken into the Cablevision, that was the first company, and then Microsoft eventually. Many tech professionals don't come from technical background. What really is important is practical skills, experience, and a willingness to learn. As an employer right now, I would rather take someone who is willing to learn over someone who has all the degrees and all the certificates in the world. The second myth that I really want to just debunk right now is that tech is only for young people. It is not true at all. People enter tech at various ages. There's so much value in lived experiences. Like if I have someone who has, again, speaking from my perspective as an employer now. If I have someone who has worked with kids and has done a great job of working with kids, but hasn't done as much, coding as some of the younger people, honestly, I would rather take the first person because lived experiences sometimes is a lot much more powerful than the tech skills. You do need the tech skills. I want to be clear about that. But don't feel like, oh, because I'm 40, I, did 20 years of something else or 30 years of something else, and now I want to switch and it's too late for me. That is not true at all. It is never too late for anyone to change. So I know I shared my story, but I also wanted to share just a couple of other people's stories, so you know that it's not uncommon to switch and to break into tech. So this is Gael, I think I said her name right. And she transitioned to user experience and user design at age 40. Now, the way she did hers is she took her background of publishing. So she was in print publishing where she was designing graphics and books and print materials. And she took that, she retrained herself, she upskilled, and then she moved into UX and UI design work. In her case, she went through a boot camp, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to. The most important thing is, what's my experience? What am I passionate about? And what can I do to upskill to get myself to the next level? All right. Ebony is she's no longer there, but she used to be what was her role? Like a senior level executive at Salesforce. And for her story is really, her story is really interesting because she actually started in IT and then moved into philanthropy where she was doing some nonprofit work and then came back into product management at Salesforce. And at the time of me putting the slides together, her last role at Salesforce was now philanthropy management for Salesforce. So can you see how she took all of her experiences and sort of carved a role and a niche area for herself in Salesforce? So tech is very flexible. There is not just one path into tech. Tech is a very broad range of roles. And I have a list that I'll share in a bit. So I want you to embrace the fact that you have a different perspective, embrace the fact that you have diverse experience, and then start to think, how can my diverse experience contribute to a tech organization? All right. So going to just jump right into practical steps on breaking into tech. The very first thing that I highly encourage you to do is to identify the right tech role for you. So like I shared the two examples and from my story, there's so many different things that people can do. But the first thing is to understand what is out there. What are the options what constitutes tech? What roles constitute tech? What are the options that are out there? Again, it could be software development, it could be UI, it could be data analytics. There's also what do they call it? Managing data servers, right? Because Amazon has huge, huge data servers. Apple, Microsoft, all these companies have huge data centers, and they need people to manage those centers. So that's a new and emerging field. There's AI. AI is opening up all sorts of roles right now. So what are the options? You need to first of all figure out what are the options. And then the second thing is to know your strengths. What am I good at? What do I suck at? And what do I really like to do? So, as I said, when I was sharing my story, I knew that because I'm an optimist and everything is always okay, it's unicorns and rainbows, I'm always happy. Being a quality assurance person was not quite the right role for me, just based on my personality, because everything is fine. For my sister, I'll give my sister as an example. She's a very detail oriented person, like extremely detail oriented. And she can be looking through documents and spot like 10 places where the person didn't dot their I, right? So those are the kinds of people that would thrive in a quality assurance role because that's what they're naturally good at. They're naturally good at spotting issues. They're naturally good at, being able to take things apart and see what the issues are. Whereas for me, my passion and what I was good at was really just creating and imagining things. So, what are your strengths and what are your interests? Super, super important to know that. There is a saying that that the sun showers the earth with billions of kilowatts of energy, and the worst you will get is a sunburn, right? If you stay out in the sun for too long. But a laser beam is just I believe it's either a few or 1,000 kilowatts of energy. Anyways, much, much, much smaller than a billion kilowatts of energy. But when you take those thousands kilowatt of energy and you focus it in the right direction, lasers can cut diamonds. And so that's the power of focus. Far too often, I see people apply to software engineering roles. Then they switch and apply to UX. And then they switch and they apply to product management. And then they do data analytics. They're just like trying everything you can. You throw spaghetti at the wall and to try to see what sticks. But if you take that approach, you're not likely to see success because you're not focused. So very, very important to be focused. And how can you be focused? Know your options, know your strengths, know your interests, know your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. So let's not kid ourselves about that. So what are those weaknesses? What are those strengths? And then once you know those two things, you can find your fit. So once you figure out, okay, these are the things that I'm good at, then you know what to pursue, and then you know what to upskill yourself in. So I put here just a list of roles, different roles that really constitute tech. And this is not even an exhaustive list at all. You could be a software engineer, you could be a cloud solutions architect, you could be a hardware engineer, you could be an SEO specialist, you could be an AI engineer, you could be cybersecurity is hot right now. You could be a cybersecurity analyst. There's so many things. Now, sometimes when I talk to people, they'd say, I really love tech, but I don't want to be stuck behind a desk all day. I really love people. I really love talking to people. I want to be out and about. I want to be, working and walking. And there are roles for people like that in tech. So that's the beauty of tech, is there's just so many options. And so on the right, there are some things that you could do in tech. You could be a content manager for a tech company, right? You could be a community manager for tech companies. Tech companies are really huge right now on trying to form communities around their services and their products because it lowers the cost of customer acquisition. So they're really investing in community managers. So you are in tech, but you're doing something that you love. You could be a customer success manager. A customer success manager is someone who loves talking to people and understands tech. So you can interpret what the engineers are saying and translate that to what the average Joe would understand. So it's a really, really important role. You could be a technical recruiter. You could be an evangelist, tech evangelist. There's so many, many options that are out there. So the question is, how do you figure out what is good for you? Now, I am a power user of ChatGPT, so my presentation would not be complete if I didn't put a ChatGPT component. So as I was putting this together, I was like, how can I don't want to just preach at people. I want to give practical tools and I want to make sure that they have actionable steps. So what I did was I put together a ChatGPT prompt, and I can share this with everyone after. ChatGPT is such a powerful tool in that it can take on the persona of anyone, right? And so in this prompt, I'm telling it what persona to take on. I said, I want you to think like a very experienced career coach. I am exploring career opportunities in the tech industry, but I'm not sure where to start. And I like some guidance on finding the best fit for my skills and interests. Then you give it a little bit about you. These are my strengths. I love problem solving. I like to be creative. I love talking to people. I learn things really quickly, or I am able to simplify concepts, or I love writing. Technical writing is also a big area in the tech world. And then you can add any technical skills that you have, and you may not have any, and that's okay, right? Oh, I know some coding in Python. I'm a whiz at Excel. I'm very good at graphic design, whatever it is. And if you have nothing, you skip it. And then what are your interests within or outside tech? So it could be, oh, I really love web development, or I love sports, or I love working with kids. Whatever that is, just throw it in there. The more detail you can provide, the better. And then just outline your previous experience, your lived experiences, your work experience, anything. It could be related to tech or not related to tech. And when you put this prompt in, it would spit out, and then there's a third piece where I ask it specifically to just give me 3 areas. You could change it to 5, you could change it to 2, whatever you want. And then it gives me, it would spit out a list of 3 different areas that I could be good at and why it thinks it's a good match. So let's say, for example, I was done with my company and I wanted to go back into the tech world. I would guess, just based on my experience and everything that has happened, some of the roles that ChatGPT would recommend for me would be tech evangelist, because I do a lot of speaking now. So I could go be an evangelist for someone's technical product. I'm sure it would spit out entrepreneur in residence for a tech company, or a product manager, or a product lead, something like that. So just because of my experience in building things from scratch, those are the kinds of roles that it would suggest to me. So I highly encourage you to take this. Again, I can share this after and see what happens. See what ChatGPT suggests for you. And it doesn't have to be ChatGPT. It could be any of the other platforms. All right. So I said we first of all figure out what you should be pursuing, right? So say you've done that, you've narrowed it down. Now, the next thing you need to do is build your skill sets. And there are so many online learning platforms. There are paid versions, there are free versions. In my experience, when I started trying to break into tech way back in Nigeria, I used the free versions of things. I found whatever I could find on Google, free code camp. I used that. And then when I did have a job and I'd graduated and I was trying to break into Microsoft and I was trying to work on that project with Django, that's when I started to invest in some of the paid courses on Udemy and whatnot. So it really depends on individuals. I also put here that there's boot camps that you can attend and certifications that you can also take. But it really depends on individuals. It depends on your current situation. If, for example, you are in a situation where you feel, I need to make a change in the next 6 months, right? You have a very hard deadline and you're invested in it and you have financial resources to invest in like a boot camp, then I would say go do a boot camp because it's intensive, it's quick, and a lot of boot camps have resources where they help you to connect you with employers. I would just say be very, very careful of the specific boot camp that you sign up for. Some do not provide as much value as others. For certifications, um, I just want to share one thing I think about when it comes to certifications is there are certain fields where certifications can be helpful. Cloud computing, cybersecurity, data science. These are some of the roles that certifications can be helpful just to show that you know something, but you never, ever want to depend on certifications solely. It will never be enough. This was my experience, like I shared when I graduated. Like I had a master's degree in computer science from Tufts University, and nobody would look at me twice because a certificate is not enough. Certificate is not enough to prove to a future employer that you are worth the risk. Now, when I was an employee and I used to hear people say, people use the word risk around people, I used to get so offended. Like, why would you put me and risk in the same sentence? That makes no sense. This business people, they're awful. They're all about the bottom dollar and so on and so forth. But now being on the employer side, I see things a lot differently. And so when people are nervous about taking a risk on a person, it's not personal. It's not about you, the individual. There's just so many factors that come into play when you're hiring somebody. You could hire someone and they come on the team and they're a wrong fit for the team, and that destabilizes the team and that brings productivity down. And for every day that productivity is down, money is being burned. You could come in and ship out some code that is malicious, that causes the company to lose millions or thousands or millions of dollars in lawsuits. So as an employer, there's so many things that you have to think about when you're bringing on a new team member that as an employee, you're not necessarily privy to. So when you're thinking about breaking into an organization or breaking into tech, you have to be able to demonstrate to an organization, this is the value that I bring to your organization, and this is why you should take a chance on me. Hopefully that makes sense. So just to recap, you got to build your skill sets, whether it's with free courses or online courses, boot camps or certifications. It really depends on your personal situation, how much time you have, how much money you have to invest, and how quickly you want to make that switch. All right. Okay. Then the next thing is, after building your skill sets, again, like I said, it's not enough to just have a certificate. We need to now build a portfolio to showcase your skills. The way to think about it is you're taking all of the theoretical things that you've learned and you're bringing it into the real world. So I learned about, what's this? Oh man, it's been a while. I'm trying to remember the name of a tech that I was learning. And it was all about how to spin up web applications really quickly. And like I said, I had kids and I felt where my kids went to daycare, we weren't getting any notifications of what they were doing, how the child was progressing and all of that. And so I was like, all right, this is something I care about. So I'm going to create a platform that would allow a daycare company to share notes and share pictures and videos with parents. I can't remember the tech I was using, but another thing that I really cared about was, I was an immigrant and I met my husband here. And so I was like, man, if not that my friend connected me with my husband, I would never have met him. And this was pre-dating apps and all the dating websites that we have now. So I decided to build a platform that would allow African men and African women to connect with each other and date. Again, this was pre all the apps that we have. I always joke and I say that I was just ahead of my time, that if I had done that app, if I'd created that app during COVID, I would have been super successful, but I was doing it way, way ahead of time. But the point is, it was something that I cared about. It was something that I was passionate about. And I used that to build a real world project that I could then put on my resume, that I could then have a conversation with in an interview. After I put those projects on my resume, when I would go into an interview, nobody was asking me what I learned in my master's program. Everybody was they were always immediately jumping to the projects. Oh, tell me about this project. Tell me about that project. And the interesting thing is that I never finished any of them. It was just good enough for me to say, hey, I thought of this problem and I thought of a way to solve it. I went and I learned technology to solve it, and I started to solve it, and I have a proof of concept, right? And I was able to show that I was able to work the full stack from front end to back end. And that was enough for the interviewers. So whatever it is, whether it's UX design or even community management, you can think about projects. What portfolio can you build to showcase your newly found skills? So again, ChatGPT, because sometimes we get stumped when it comes to ideas, and so ChatGPT is a great partner to help you get ideas going. So I have this. I'll also share it, where you can just say, okay, I've decided what path I want to choose. I want to go down. Here's my specific interest. I like, again, I'm using my kids. I like daycare stuff, or I'm interested in immigrant dating, or I want to create a platform for minorities in STEM, whatever that is, put it in there. And then it would suggest different project ideas for you and really tell you where to start. So this is just a starting prompt that you can use. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll share this with you. So once you've done that, you've figured out your path, you've built skills, you started to build projects, you need to start networking and start building connections in tech. LinkedIn is hugely important for this part of the process. You want to have an optimized LinkedIn profile. You want to be posting regularly about the projects that you're working on, right? Very important to put that out there. Here's what you're working on. Here's what you're doing. And just, telling people what you're looking for. There's a saying, I don't know if it's Nigerian or not, but that closed mouths don't get fed. So if you don't open your mouth and communicate with your network what it is that you're interested in, people will not know what you need, and they wouldn't know how to help you. So send connection requests to people. Some people may say yes, some people would say no. Doesn't really matter. Again, all you need is one person to say yes to you. And if you're asking people for their time, I would just be very respectful, knowing that people don't have tons of time to give. So sometimes people reach out to me and say, hey, can I have an hour of your time? I'm like, man, an hour of my time is a lot of time. So you could start with something like, hey, like if you identify people in organizations that you want to work at, or people who are in the roles that you are trying to break into, you could just send them a message and say something like, hey, I looked at your profile. You seem like a great person to follow. I'm trying to break into tech in this role, and I just want to connect. Just start with that. Right? I just want to connect. Start with that. But if you start with, hey, can you give me an hour of your time? I'll be like, ugh, I don't really have time for this. So you start with that, and then you can build a relationship. If a person posts something interesting, you can comment on the post, and say, oh, that's a very interesting insight. Here's what I am doing. And that's how you can build an online relationship. Then you can also go to in-person events. There's meetups, tech conferences, hackathons. Just meet people, share with people what you're up to, share with them your passion, your goals. You really honestly never know when you would share your passions, your goal, your interest with the right person. And again, I keep saying this, you just need one yes. Like when I was learning to code and I reached out to that guy in India, I'm pretty sure, if memory serves me well, that I reached out to a bunch of other people, but he was the only one that said yes to me. And that was what changed my life completely. So reach out, don't be shy about it. Tell people what you're trying to do, ask for help, and people will be willing to help if you ask the right way, which actually leads me to the next point is, getting a mentor. There's huge value in learning from others, And I think a lot of times where the mentorship thing breaks down is where, because one person typically might have been asked by 10 people to be a mentor. So you gotta build that relationship slowly but surely, and then really get them to say, hey, this person has been on my radar for a while. I could really help them, take things to the next level. But you got to be intentional about it. And mentors can really make a huge difference, not just even when you're trying to get a job, but even after you get the job and trying to upskill and move to the next level. Mentors are a huge, they play a huge role in helping. So going to networking events, going to on LinkedIn, there's something somebody told me that I thought was, wow, this is awesome. They said a mentor is not necessarily someone that you actually know personally or have communications with personally. It could be somebody who is just a thought leader and they're constantly pushing out content around how to break into tech, and you're following them, right? That's a mentor because you're learning from them. So it's not enough to just sit down and hope that you're doing the right thing. You got to put yourself out there. It's not enough, to just learn the technical skills. You got to learn some of the tips and the tricks and the strategies of how to break into tech. And that could be from a mentor that you have a one-on-one relationship with, or it could be from a mentor that you're actually just following from afar. So 46 minutes in, I'm going to run through this so we have time for Q&A. But I just wanted to, first of all, normalize imposter syndrome, because sometimes what holds us back is believing that we are not enough and believing that we're not good enough, believing that you don't belong, and believing that very soon people will find you out. When I was at Microsoft, my imposter syndrome was on full blast. Like, I was like, you do not belong here, girl. Everybody else around you started learning to code when they were 10. You started learning to code when you were 20 something. This is so bad. Very soon, you're going to be kicked out. Oh my God, it's performance review time. Oh, this is the last day I'm going to be. Like, it was so much noise. I kept just telling myself that I never stopped to appreciate that I was actually providing value to the organization. And I was doing things that was helping the team move forward. I was in my head the whole time. So what I would tell you is imposter syndrome is real. I feel imposter syndrome up till today. Like, I have, by the grace of God, I have built a $3 million company, but I still feel sometimes I'm like, am I good enough? Oh my gosh. Like, when I get invited to things that I've never done, I'm like, oh my gosh, can I do this? So it's normal. It's real. You just have to learn to seek feedback, because the story you're telling yourself in your head is probably not what your manager thinks. You need to learn to celebrate your achievements, celebrate your wins, and then connect with other people who can relate, right? Because sometimes you feel it's just you, but most of the time it's not just you. So imposter syndrome is real, but we got to overcome it, and we can't let that stop us. You have to build resilience. You will get way more no's than yeses. Like I've been saying, all you need is the one yes. In any career, there will be setbacks, right? Regardless of tech or not tech, there will always be setbacks. So I don't want you to try and then you hit one setback and you're like, that's it. That's a sign. I'm not supposed to do this. There are no signs. The only sign you're getting is to keep moving. All right. You got to keep moving until you get that one yes. As you're working on your project, it's going to be hard. You're going to face challenges. You're going to face issues where you feel like just giving up, but you can't give up. You have to learn from your failure, seek support when needed, stay focused on the goal, and keep moving. All right. Okay. I think I'm right at the end. So just key takeaways. Again, you got to identify your interests and strengths, because you want to be laser focused on one particular field in tech that you want to break into. You don't want to be trying a bunch of different things. Build skills through learning, take courses if you can afford it, take certifications, just make sure it's worth it. And then build projects. You got to be able to show off what you can do. Network, seek mentors, be on LinkedIn, be active on LinkedIn, connecting with people, following people, Go to conferences where you can. There are a lot of online meetups. Go to those places. It just takes one person to believe in you, and that can change your entire life. And just stay resilient. It's not likely anybody who has achieved anything major in this life hardly ever got it right from day one, hardly ever faced challenges. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. Some days it's like, yeah, I got it. And then the next day is like, oh no, I don't got it. This is the worst thing in the world. And then the next day is like, yeah, I got it. So it just goes like that. Just embrace it, enjoy the journey, and just keep your eyes set on the goal that you set for yourself. That's how you can break into tech, and that's how you can become anything really that you want to be. So this is my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to scan the code and connect with me. I'd be more than happy to connect and share any more tips and tricks that I have with you guys. Okay, I have, let's see, 10 minutes. Sorry, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'll send my LinkedIn profile with the chat GPT prompts as well. Let me see what questions we have. Okay. All right. So, do you have any advice for interviews? I'm transitioning into tech, and I feel like I keep getting overlooked by younger candidates. So this will happen. It's not, especially if you're the person who's recruiting maybe has a bias for younger candidates. What I would say is, depending on what you mean though by transitioning into tech, I don't know if it's a software engineering role or not, but there are a bunch of books like the one I shared, the Cracking the Coding Interview. She also has another one where it's cracking the product manager interviews. More likely than not, there's going to be resources either in book form or even chat GPT that helps you to practice your interview. There's actually an AI tool. Oh my goodness, I forget the name. I'm going to make a note. There's an AI tool that I'll share with you as well, where you can practice your interview. You tell it the kind of interview that you're having and you practice with it, and then it gives you feedback. It tells you, here's what you could do differently, here's how you could frame something differently. And very, very importantly, if you are and I use the word older very loosely, just because you said younger, you need to tie your responses in the interview to your lived experience, right? You need to demonstrate why having you as an quote unquote older candidate is better for the organization, the things that you have learned in your life beyond the tech skills, right? Because every interview would have the technical aspect and it'll have the soft skills. The soft skills place is where you get to shine and really share how you, as a more mature, more experienced person, can really add value and really add value to the organization and not be a quote unquote liability, which is what some people feel like older people are, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I would say for the interviews, find resources, either if it's a coding role, get the Gail Lackman book, study that top to bottom so that your technical skills are really good. And then when it comes to the soft skills section, really lean into your lived experiences to really help them be like, oh my gosh, yeah, this person is not going to be somebody that, doesn't show up at work, or somebody that tells us 5 minutes before the meeting time that they're not coming, right? This is a more mature person, and we're going to have to do less work with them. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Check on that. Sorry, there's so many questions here, so I'm just reading through it to see which one I may not have answered in the session. Okay, so somebody said, I'm looking to break into tech from the hospitality sector. How can I leverage my previous experience in tech, in the tech industry? So for this, I highly recommend you take that chat GPT prompt that I shared and let chat GPT give you a bunch of ideas. I will say, just off the top of my head, somebody who's in the hospitality sector is used to dealing with people. You're used to having you have really good customer service. So like a customer success manager is probably going to be a really great role for you, because 9 times out of 10, customer success or support roles, because for support roles, a lot of times when people are calling in for support, they're pissed, right? They're pissed and they need somebody who is going to be a calming presence. I completely understand how you feel. Let me take care of that for you. That is something that a lot of engineers don't have, if we're being real. So there are a lot of options that you could break into leveraging your hospitality experience. But again, use the chat GPT prompt, and I'd actually be curious. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be very curious what it tells you, it gives you as ideas. So let me know. Okay. Ooh. Um, let's see. Which coding language do you think is the most useful / will be the most required in tech? This is actually a really great question. And it's a great question because the answer changes every single month. A few years ago, it was Java. If you didn't know Java, you were not learning the right language. Then you switched to Python. If you didn't know Python, then you were not learning the right language. Then way back when I was starting, it was ASP.NET. ASP.NET was the hottest thing in the tech world at the time, but nobody uses ASP.NET now. And so my advice to you would not always go after shiny objects, which is important sometimes, because like I said, in my experience, when I was trying to break into tech, I did go for the latest and greatest, which nobody's using now. Like hardly anyone's using Django now. So if this is your first foray into learning how to program, I would go with something basic, like go with Python, right? Because the thing about coding is that if you learn how to think like a coder, picking up a new language is not hard. Like if I learn Python and the organization that I want to work with, codes in JavaScript, I can easily teach myself JavaScript because now I understand how coding works in general. So if you've never coded before, I would encourage you to do something basic, just something easy like Python. That will give you a foundation that you can build upon, so that tomorrow when it's not Python and it's now, HAML or I just made that up, some random language, you already know the basics and you already know the foundation, and you're just kind of learning something new. Because way back when in the 80s or the 70s, actually, BASIC was the language that was hot, but people who are coding in BASIC are coding in Python today. And it's only because they learned the foundation. So most important thing, if you've never coded before, learn a language that can teach you the foundations. If you have coded before and you're just trying to learn something new, then ChatGPT is a great partner to say, what's the latest and hottest technology that I should upskill myself in. All right, hopefully that answers that. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, so many questions. Oh my gosh. I think we're at 11:59. I think what I'll do is, if we can get some of these questions, I'm more than happy to like do a recording after and just give my take on it. I really want to answer everyone's questions. So maybe Ashley, if you're there, is it okay if I do a recording, I answer some of these questions, and then we can send it out with the chat GPT prompts that I created for this presentation, so everyone has it. I just want to be respectful of time. I know it's 12 o'clock and this was slated for 11 to 12, but all sorts of great questions that are coming in, and I really want to be able to answer them. So I would assume that that's good. Okay, yep, they say that's good. So I'll do that tonight, and I'll send it out so everybody has answers. Again, I'd be happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. And help anyone out the best way that I can. Thank you all so much for being here and for staying and for listening. It is the one thing maybe I'll just say, I saw something about imposter syndrome. Again, imposter syndrome is real. It is real, real, real. And it affects more people than we realize. So that's one thing, again, I just want to double tap on. But you have to learn that who you are as a person, your value as a person is not tied to whether you succeed at a project or fail at a project. I feel like once you separate those two things, it's easier to have the confidence to try. Because I was always bogged down with, oh my gosh, I don't want to try this new thing, because if I fail, then everybody's going to laugh at me or everybody's going to know that I don't really know what I'm doing. Like so much fear of failure. I really feel like imposter syndrome is really tied to fear of failure. And so much fear of failure. And then the fear of failure was now casting a negative light on how I valued myself. And so I was like, okay, I'm not even going to try anything because I want to feel valued. And I know that if I try and if I fail, then I'm going to feel devalued. But if you try to separate the fact that you are who you are, and just as a human being, you have worth and you have value, and nothing can ever take away from that. Whether you succeed at something, whether you fail at something, nothing can take away from the innate value that you have. You will find the confidence to succeed. You will go out and you will try new things. And if you fail, it's okay. It's okay. Everybody fails. But if we don't go out and try something new, then we'll never get better than we are today. So we gotta make that separation between our innate value as human beings and then whether we succeed or we fail. That's a whole different topic, guys. But I'm happy to talk more about that at some point. All right, webinar is over. Thank you all again for being here. It was such a pleasure chatting with you all.